Hey guys, welcome back. I have a very mysterious plant in the fish room. No one can identify it, and we're going to check that out. I think it's actually one of our oasis plants that has changed a bit from growing in high light. So I'm going to collect a few of them and bring them indoors. We'll grow them in some jars and compare them all to each other. You'll see what I mean. Let's check it out. Hey guys, so today we are going to build 4 new jar aquariums, but we're going to start with a look at the original plant. I've been growing this stuff for years in my various jar aquariums, and I didn't think it was a big deal. I uploaded a short video showing off this plant recently, and it received a fair amount of attention. Some people were asking, what is that plant? And honestly, I could not remember, because our Wedelia and our alligator weed grow to resemble each other when grown in our jars. So I'm starting this project here on November 22nd. This is day 1, and we'll be comparing some Wedelia, some alligator weed, and some of our mysterious red stem plant. Overall, I want to prove that that is in fact alligator weed. I need to prove it to myself more than anything. We're using some of these 1-quart mason jars. They are covered in symbolism and measurements, which is not ideal for viewing, but for our purposes, these jars will do fine. So I'm starting with some organic compost. This is black cow mixed with some material from the oasis. It sounds a little funny, but I'm pretty sure that we've hatched some interesting microfauna from this type of compost before, and I'm hoping that we see that again. I have a good luck charm today. This is Clay's keychain that he sent me for bucket ponds, as well as the bucket ponds bracelet that my wife had made a while back. And I'll be wearing that as a good luck charm during this build and some other projects in the future. Maybe we'll gather up some more good luck charms too. And now I'm adding a piece of screen mesh, but we're only adding it to 2 of the aquariums. The other one we'll try without any mesh. And I'm basically checking out different ideas. I'm trying to find our best type of substrate for our jar aquariums. So we're just going to tuck those down in there, and I'm trying to use this compost as a more available food source for our microfauna. But it is compost. I'm worried about it making a mess and floating around the tank. So we're using this little screen mesh to help pin it down. In that 3rd jar without any mesh, that'll be a bit like a test of its own to see if we really need it. Do we need this screen, or can we run a jar without it? So yes, this video is going to be a series of different ideas put into play, different experiments, if you will. But it's a very simple setup. We're using compost and lava rock, and we're just going to have about the same amount of lava rock in every jar. My goal is to help keep that compost pinned, to add some material for beneficial bacteria to cling to, and also to look nice. I want it to look cool. But I don't want to use the sand. We were doing this type of thing with our sand before, the pseudo Wallstad method, but that sand is messy, and it takes me a while to process it. I don't like to rinse sand. It uses a lot of water. So instead, we're going to try it here with no sand, just stone and compost. Remember, that jar on the left is a little different. It does not have any screen inside. This is the exact same screen that I used in the pond ecosphere like 5 years ago. It's the same roll of non-biodegradable screen mesh, and we know that it's entirely aquarium safe. So we're going to add some water in here. I want to get it up to a certain level. I'm trying to make each of these about the same, similar amounts of compost, rock, and water. And I'm not being too shy about adding the water, because I want to see if we stir that compost up, will it make a big mess, which it probably will. We're going to take some samples from this jar over here that you guys have not seen before. And it's basically a collection of material scraped off of my pond pre-filter that's running the Guppy aquarium. Very interesting, and it's full of all sorts of interesting things, namely beneficial bacteria. Every little speck in here, every little piece of a plant, it's all covered in beneficial bacteria. There's also going to be some microfauna in here that live on the filter as well. And I'm hoping to just inject this stuff directly into our new jars to help kickstart their life. You may see a small amount of movement in this water from the microfauna, but generally we're looking for bacteria. We want to add just a small amount of beneficial bacteria to start life within our new projects. You could think of this like cycling an aquarium. It's very similar, actually. I'm using the measurements on those jars to make sure that we add about the same amount of water to each project. Initially, I started with clean fresh water. I should have mentioned that. But these jars will be essentially twins or triplets. And I used to do that a lot. I used to build everything in threes, and I enjoy it a great deal. It's a lot of fun. We're going to add some more aquarium water here. This is from the Guppy Paradise, which is very active biologically. We may add some worms, ostracods, and other pets from this water directly. We'll take it up to about 800 milliliters, roughly, right about there. And there's the mess that I expected. In the jar with no screen mesh, our compost has gone everywhere. That's a problem, but we're not going to give up. We're not going to stop. It's fine. Our microfauna and our plants will eventually consume all of that material, though it may take some time. And again, we're just filling these up to about 800 milliliters. It seems as though the screen mesh helps a bit with controlling the blowback of the compost. I don't know what you want to call that. And now we're going to add our plants. So this is alligator weed. I know for sure that this is alligator weed. I originally collected this near the Alapaha River in southern Georgia. I collected it about 4 or 5 years ago. Since then, the location has been paved over and turned into a boat ramp. It's very unfortunate for the snails, frogs, and other things that live there. But we did manage to capture some snails and this alligator weed from that location. So that's a win for us. We will preserve a little bit of that lost biosphere for posterity. And we're just going to tuck that alligator weed in here. You'll notice that I am not very careful with my stem cuttings. I don't worry about it too much. You can pretty much just cram this stuff in a jar and it will figure out the rest. You know, as long as you've got it roughly in there right side up, it'll be fine. I did have a video collecting the stuff from the Oasis, but it was not the greatest video, you guys. The camera was shaking. I didn't like it. So there's our alligator weed, wedged down in the jar with the other cutting put in there as well. 2 cuttings to start that one. So next we're going to build a Wedelia jar. Yeah, there's a nice piece of Wedelia. You can see the leaves and stems are quite different than the alligator weed, especially the leaves, which are very large and broad. Now I'm just going to stab this down into our new jar, jar number 2, and I'm not even going to pluck the leaves off there. Now the leaves that end up underwater will most likely wilt and be consumed by our little pets. And that's fine. I'm not too worried about it. I'm hoping that will trigger the plant to grow roots. You know, it's a semi-aquatic, what would you say, a swamp plant. It's very comfortable in swamp-like conditions. So I think that it will have an evolutionary trick that will allow it to root in here very quickly, even with those leaves attached to the bottom. But my point is, don't expect those leaves to survive. Don't think that you could just stick this in an aquarium and have a beautiful leafy plant. It's not going to work forever. But I'm just kind of cramming it into the jar here. As long as I do not break those stems or right angle them, it'll be fine. So my goal is to get many of its little nodes into contact with the water, which will trigger it to root. Generally with these plants, every stem has a few nodes on it that can become leaves or roots, or even buds to grow new stems. So here's a cutting of the red mystery plant from our jar aquariums off screen. And we're just going to drop that right in there. I might add 2, but I think we'll go with 1 for this one. And this is our comparison. You know, we're comparing our mystery plant to our alligator weed and our Wedelia. And I'm pretty sure that it is not Wedelia. I'm pretty sure it's alligator weed, but trust me, you guys, over the course of a year or 2, that Wedelia will grow to resemble the alligator weed very closely. It's interesting. We'll see some of that here as I'm running this project for about a month. And we are going to set up a 4th jar, but we'll talk about that here in a moment. Right now, I just want to scoot everything back. You'll see our ecospheres there on the back row as well. I'll be moving them to the windowsill very soon. But looking closely here at jar number 2 with the Wedelia, we see something very odd. We have a little hitchhiker who came in with the plant. I have no idea what species that is, what type of insect it may be, but that's okay. You know, maybe it's going to eat some Wedelia leaves. I don't know. I'm not really too worried about it. We'll try to let it go outside if possible, but he's really cool and fun to see. I'm always interested in capturing new things and working them into our biosphere when possible. But here it is. This is our combo jar, is what I'm calling it. I had a few extra cuttings of Wedelia, alligator weed, and the mystery plant. So I put them all in here together, and we'll see if they can coexist. And if nothing else, we'll see how our substrate fares against a jar that only has lava rock and clean water. I added no microfauna in here. I added no compost. It's just clean water, lava rock, and the plants. So that'll be like our control, our combo jar. We can see if these other plants fail, we know because it's because of my substrate. It was not adequate. Or perhaps it made the water too toxic or something. We don't know. That's why we run these tests. But there we go. There's the crew. I did assemble the control jar off screen, but I hope that's fine. I just had to throw some stuff in a cup. Some lava rock, some water, you know. So here we are on day 3, and the tanks look pretty good. Not much has changed, really. Our alligator weed in jar number 1, it looks pretty similar to when I threw it in here 3 days ago. Our Wedelia also looks very much like it did when I added it to the project, but I'm glad we decided not to cut that flower bud off because it opened up into a nice little flower. I love Wedelia, you guys. I know a lot of these plants are hated and considered invasive, but I like them. You know, I like this Wedelia. It's right here in a jar. It's very much contained. It's not a problem. I don't think it's much different than, you know, these people who raise all the exotic species and things. Like, yeah, the Wedelia is here in my area. I'm not going to contaminate anything because it's already naturalized here. Looking at jar number 1, we see a very small amount of root growth, and that's cool. Just a little tiny nub of a root. Jar number 3 with our mysterious red stem plant that I'm pretty sure is alligator weed. The stem has started to fail. It started to melt. We have no root growth at all. And yes, the stem is failing. It is wilting. But that's fine. I have a plan. I guarantee we can bring it right back to life. In our control jar here, jar number 4, everything looks good. Yeah. Again, not much growth here either. Everything pretty much looks the same as it did on day 1. But that's okay. Yeah, we're not too worried about it. These things take time, you guys. That's one thing about plants, and especially nano aquariums, jar aquariums, you know. There is no instant gratification. It takes time. You really have to allow it to develop. And I've said this before, but these jars will take on a characteristic of their own. Things will just kind of work out into a way where this jar might raise ostracods and that one might have detritus worms, you know? I think it's really cool. So now I have a new idea. We're going to add some small leaf spiderwort, also known as river spiderwort, to each of our jars. I collected this on the channel during our how to find a dayflower video a while back. And this is not dayflower, this is just a similar looking plant. I believe it is small leaf spiderwort. But I've read that plants in the spiderwort family can add root hormone to other plants. When you put the cuttings in a jar, it can trigger other plants to grow roots more easily. And I was very intrigued by that, and I thought, why not test it? Let's test it here on the channel. Now, really, I should have done this in its own video, but when I build in 3s and 4s, you know, when I build like triple setup projects, this triple redundancy, I like to run a whole lot of different tests. Anything I can to compare and learn, you know, it's very useful. So we've added a small leaf spiderwort stem to each one of these jars. And just taking a look at them as they are, we don't see much of any root growth. Just pretty much like they were when I stuck them in here, just some old stems. It's very much like a flower vase or something, you know, some cut roses and some water. All right, and we're back. It's day 6, and I sound really good with this new microphone. I hope I do anyway. It probably popped right there. But here we are on day 6 after setup, and the jars look really good. Check that out. One jar has gone green with green water, and that's okay. But jar number 1 here has immediately shown a ton of root growth, and in fact, the plants are perking up a great deal as well. That is amazing, you guys. I'll have to get a little closer so I can really show you what I'm talking about. So here our alligator weed is going vertical, it's reaching for the sky, as well as the spiderwort. But the real show is down here, under the water. We have a ton of roots. Yes. So we had no roots for 3 days, and then I added some spiderwort cuttings, and instantly, 3 days later, after adding those cuttings, we have a ton of root growth. Yeah. So it could be coincidental, but I'm willing to bet that the spiderwort did have an effect on the other plants, because suddenly each jar is growing roots. The Wedelia jar is looking great. It's starting to organize itself a little bit after I kind of crammed it in here. And that flower is hanging on very nicely. I've had a nice flower in here for almost, 4 or 5 days now. Jar number 3 with that wilted, failing stem has recovered. It has one wilted leaf right there from when it was about to give up, but it's already reaching for the sky and it's already improving. We have a lot of green water in here that has appeared over the course of the last 3 days, and that's cool. And yeah, we have some roots in here as well. The designs on these jars are not optimal for viewing, you guys, so if you're going to use mason jars, make sure you get some that don't have all this crap all over them. I mean, I enjoy the ball mason jars and stuff, but yeah. But yes, there's roots everywhere, you guys. Every single plant is covered in roots. Even the spiderwort cuttings that you saw me add, they had no roots at all. Here in the combo jar, the control jar, we have crazy root growth everywhere, and all the plants are looking pretty good. Yeah, check it out, though. There's our mystery red stem. There's some alligator weed, some Wedelia, and lots of roots. Yeah, all those white things are all roots, and I think that's really cool. So we've managed to root every single stem. That's a 100% success rate on Wedelia, dayflower, and alligator weed. And our mysterious red stem plant, which I'm pretty sure is alligator weed. Forgive me if I babble a little bit here, there, here and there, guys. I'm not used to doing such long videos, so yeah, I might talk a little gibberish occasionally. Sometimes I really feel like I need a co-host to help with these voiceovers. That would be fun, but I don't think it's going to happen. So 14 days after setup, the jars look pretty good, man. We have a lot of new growth all of a sudden. We've got plants reaching up out of the jars, exploring their local environment. No doubt in time they would reach into other jars and we'd have a big tangled mess, which is fine. That's fun to work on too. The combo jar is looking amazing. It's wild in here. It's crazy. There's roots everywhere. There's plants just busting out. And yeah, that's so cool, you guys. Look at all that root growth in there. So I believe the spiderwort did have a noticeable effect, as we had no roots for 3 days. We added spiderwort, and we had tons of roots 3 days later, leading us to this point 14 days after setup. The plants are looking good. They are trying to intermingle a little bit. I might have to space the jars out or turn them slightly. But we've got Wedelia stems, we have alligator weed, and we have lots of activity. Yeah, a little hard to see with all these plants together. I may have to move the jars off of the back row, the ecospheres. Hey guys, it's 24 days after setup, and here we are. Check it out. Here's our 4 jars. Number 1 here with alligator weed. Number 2 with Wedelia. Number 3 with red stem mystery plant. And number 4 with all the plants together. The 3 on the right received compost and stone. The one on the left received only clean water. So ultimately, our wild jar here, our control jar, looks amazing, you guys. I'm so happy with this. We've created a little 1-quart jungle environment, and I think that's awesome. I'm not going to worry too much about the pH of the water or the temperature conditions in here. Just assume that my water is roughly 7 to 6.8 pH, maybe a little lower. Temperature in here is anywhere between 60 to 80 degrees, depending on the weather. For lighting, I use some full spectrum LED lights from Walmart. Some great value hanging LED lights. And we use our flashlight for a little close-up viewing here and there. But we have tons of root growth, a little bit of algae. Not looking too bad. Now, in the short term, this clean water jar is probably the best project we have out of these four. But I believe over the long term, over the course of a year or so, these plants would starve without the nutrient load added by that compost. But it is very interesting. The alligator weed is going vertical, growing straight up into the sky, and our Wedelia is wanting to reach off and kind of expand its territory. Naturally, the Wedelia would reach over and touch some soil somewhere and would form roots. And I think the alligator weed would most likely look for a more wet area. But you can see some morphological changes on the Wedelia. It's starting to get a bit more red, both on the leaves and on the stems. And over the course of a year or so, it would come to resemble our alligator weed a bit more closely. This video was mainly for me to guarantee that I knew what plant I was growing in the jar aquariums. I was pretty sure it was Wedelia, you guys. I'm very embarrassed, but after doing this project, I can guarantee that that mystery plant is alligator weed. So the mystery is solved. Thank you to everyone who asked, though. That was a very good question on my short video. And you can see here it's starting to resemble that plant in the short video of which I spoke. Growing straight up, and it looks very much like it. And we know for sure this was alligator weed. So they are the same. The red stem is ye old alligator weed, which is native to South America, I believe, but it's been spread all around the country, around the United States, by old shipping methods and cargo and ballast and all that stuff that ships are known for. We have plenty of root growth in here. In jar number 1, as expected, some of those leaves down in the water did fail and they are wilting. Don't worry about it. The microfauna, the snails and stuff, they will eat those leaves. It's not a big deal. It's just adding food for the tank. Sometimes it's really cool to pluck leaves off your plants when they need to be plucked and put them back in the jar aquarium like it's growing its own food. It's really cool. The Wedelia here still does not fully resemble our alligator weed. The leaves are still really large and very broad. And you can see that most of those leaves that were underwater have failed as well. But the Wedelia is healthy. It's reaching out, it's expanding, and I think it makes a great jar aquarium plant. Very interesting, and all of this plant growth is basically it's acting as a filtration for the project. Not a perfect filter, of course, but all of this plant growth is basically material being removed from the aquarium. I have noticed in the past that Wedelia and alligator weed will drink a lot of water out of their jars. So if you're growing these at home in a similar fashion, remember to top up the tanks every couple days. Our spiderwort in here is a little wilted, a little burnt, but that's okay. It has done its job of providing root hormone for our other plants, and it will grow in these jars as well. They just won't be quite as healthy as the other plants. That's something we noticed with dayflower in particular. Dayflower is beautiful and I love it, but it's very vulnerable. It wilts. It's kind of weak. Our small leaf spiderwort is very similar. It's just a little stronger. And in that same vein, our Wedelia is just a little bit more durable, and our alligator weed is just like built to survive in a jar aquarium. I think it's really cool. This was the red mystery plant stem cuttings here, and they have developed quite nicely. The tank is a little dingy. I believe that the compost is adding some tannins to the water. And I have just yesterday added some cucumber slices to feed these tanks. You can see the snails there investigating already. I did not add much food over the course of this 1-month experiment because I wanted the animals to eat the compost. I was hoping that using the rock instead of the impenetrable sand layer would encourage them to get down there and munch on that stuff a great deal. Unfortunately, I haven't seen much of that. I expected to see quite a few ostracods reproducing in here and more activity in general. So it seems that we may have to tweak our ideas a little bit, maybe start off with less compost. But overall, if the plants are alive, then we know that we can eventually raise strong populations of microfauna in these projects. The combo control jar here looks amazing, and it's a literal jungle in there. Wedelia reaching down, alligator weed reaching up, and our spiderwort wilting a little bit, but it should get firmly established as well. So I will likely have to split this up into a couple different projects because this amount of plant biomass cannot feed off clean, empty water for too long. So we'll have to load them up with some plant food sooner or later. Now, looking at the Wedelia, I do see that it has gone red a little bit, like we were talking about, and over time it will change. But here's a cutting from our red mystery plant that you saw in the short video, and surprisingly, it has grown a flower. I've been growing this stuff for like 5 years in my jars, and just now it decided to make a flower, and I think that's because of the LED lights that we're using from Walmart. The great value hanging plant lights, full spectrum. That's all they say on the box. But I believe they have triggered a flowering response in our alligator weed. That's the only change I've really made to their aquariums in the past year. And they've never flowered before, so that's really cool. And this little flower helps me to identify it better. That is, in fact, alligator weed. So while performing these tests, while comparing these plants and trying to figure it out for ourselves, our original plant tissue culture has grown some flowers and revealed itself completely. So I think that's really cool. Hopefully this video wasn't too confusing. My original thought was that I didn't know what that red stem plant was. It could have been Wedelia. It could have been alligator weed. Embarrassingly, I wasn't quite sure because that's been growing in my jars for so long. So we set up this test, and ultimately we proved to myself and to ourselves at least that alligator weed and the red stem plant are the very same. So we have an ID for that. The growing the flower out of the parent culture helped a lot as well. So we have 4 new jar aquariums that I'll play with in the future. I hope that you guys had a great fun time with this video. I hope it wasn't too confusing. I know I tested out a lot of different ideas. If I have any end screens up at this moment, please check them out. You'll enjoy some of my other videos as well. And I'm always around, so don't be afraid to leave a comment. I will get back to you sooner or later. We'll talk and hang out and have a great day.